The Royals have a different type of power in their bullpen after the trade deadline. How can that benefit them moving forward? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, we're on Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know more about me and this show, well, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing. I'll be doing Chiefs postgame coming up here. Actually, next week, it'll be the first preseason game, so you can check me out over there and all season long when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase Locked On MLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. And as always, questions and comments can be left to me on YouTube or they can be left to me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. The Royals, for the third time this year, swept the Chicago White Sox. They went 12-1 in 2024 against, I'm just going to go out and say it, I don't think it's really a hot take at all. It's the worst baseball team I've ever seen. It's not to take a backhanded comment in the direction of the Chicago White Sox. I think a lot of White Sox fans would share the sentiment that baseball fans do of when you have an owner that doesn't really care about bettering the team, it can look like this. And, the Royals did what they were supposed to do against a really bad baseball team. The White Sox now 27-84. The Royals just beat up on them in all 13 games. And actually, let me take that back, 12 games, because the Royals lost one of them. But even that one loss was a doubleheader. It was a Game 2 doubleheader loss. I do wonder if the Royals didn't have any doubleheaders against the White Sox, if they would have gone 13-0, which the Royals had gone undefeated against one team in their existence. I think Nick Capel put this out here on Twitter this afternoon. They went 12 or 13-0 against the 1988 Baltimore Orioles. So the Royals got damn close to that against the 2024 Chicago White Sox after their curb-stomping 10-3 win against Chicago earlier today. The story would be the offense, right? We could talk about the last two games of the offense coming through when it mattered most. And I think we could spend a little bit of time on that. We'll probably talk about it in segment number 2 and just all 13 games the Royals had against the White Sox and what you can take away from it. But to me, that says more about how bad the White Sox pitching is, how bad their bullpen is. I mean, it's nice to see the Royals put up 10 runs, but I'd like to see 5 to 10 runs against some good pitching staffs out there, and you're hoping to see that over the final 2 months of the season. What I wanted to talk about today, and kind of recapping both games with the bullpen and what this bullpen can look like moving forward. We touched on it yesterday and what the additions of Lucas Erceg could do for this bullpen, the additions of Paul DeJong, how they play in their roles. To me, this is a great way to end the month of July. The Royals found a way to get Lucas Erceg in the game today, and I think it was the most impressive relief performance that I've seen from a Royals bullpen arm in 2024. He got 3 outs. It's not like he got the final 9 outs of the game. It's not like he danced around a bases loaded, nobody out jam. It was just pure dominance. And what he was running it up at, 99, 100, getting 2 strikeouts. One of his pitches, I'm trying not to be a prisoner of the moment, but one of his pitches was 100 on the black. I mean, it was 100 miles an hour on the outside part of the zone. It's unhittable. You could tell a major league hitter where the pitch is going to be, how hard it's going to be, and I don't think that has a 30% success rate. I think it's nearly impossible to put a ball in play and have it be a base hit on 100 in that location. And I did see some people upset about Lucas Erceg going in the 8th inning. I think it was Matt Quatrero, one, trying to get him in the ball game. And number 2, It was the top of the order for the White Sox, so he felt like let's use our best bullpen order or bullpen piece against the top of the order, the best part of the order for the Chicago White Sox, though it's not much of an order to begin with. But the exciting part about this, including today and last night, is that the Royals have power now in their bullpen, something that we had talked about in numerous episodes leading up to the deadline in July. What they needed, how they should approach it, what they should give up, guys they should target. We talked about swing and miss stuff. We talked about high velocity stuff, and they got that with Hunter Harvey. Now, Hunter Harvey has not been great for the Royals in his first 4 outings, but I'm not concerned about it whatsoever. I look at Lucas Erceg today. That's about as flawless as you can be in a 3-out sample size. I'd imagine Lucas Erceg is this team's closer. Now today, it didn't really matter. I don't know who they were lining up to pitch the 9th inning. Probably was James McArthur because he didn't throw yesterday. But I would think that Lucas Erceg is going to be the closer unless the best part of an order comes up in the 7th or the 8th inning. If they don't, and it lines up that they're going to come up in the 9th or the middle of the order is going to come up in the 9th, they'd rather have Lucas Erceg out there. But having this power in the bullpen changes everything for the relief corps. Hunter Harvey last night, as I said, was not spectacular, was not very good. But also his stuff allowed him to limit the damage. The Royals had a 2-run lead, and it's 2nd and 3rd and 1 out. And the middle of the order, and honestly, the best hitter for the White Sox in that series, Andrew Vaughn, is at the plate. If John Schreiber's out there, if James McArthur's out there, if Chris Stratton's out there, Will Smith, you are banking on soft contact. You are just hoping there to be soft contact because you're not going to get the swing and miss. Now, Hunter Harvey gave up 1 run last night. But the 2 hits that put guys and runners in scoring position, they were hit less than 80 miles an hour. I mean, it was as much of a bloop as any hit I've seen. I mean, that's the definition of a bloop. That's what I'm trying to get across here. Still a base hit. It counts as a line drive in the box score, but it was a bloop. I'm not going to say they were terrible pitches. Against Nicky Lopez, he challenged him with a 97-mile-an-hour fastball. He blooped it to left field. Luis Robert, first pitch slider on the outside corner, blooped it to right center field. I can live with that. I can't live with blowing the game, which he didn't do. In the end, it didn't matter because Sam Long came in pumping 95, 96 from the left side with a wipeout curveball. That's the type of power this bullpen just didn't have back in April and May. When you were presented an opportunity with a 1-run game or a 2-run game, and then the opponent you were facing put runners on base, you are just crossing your fingers. A ball is rolled out to Bobby Witt Jr. or it's popped up on the infield. There's a bad swing. When now you have Hunter Harvey and Lucas Erceg who can blow it by a hitter. That when there's a runner at 3rd and 1 out, it's not, let's hope there's a pop-up shallow enough to get the out, or let's hope it's a line drive or a ground ball right at somebody. Now it's, let's go get the strikeout. And I'll be honest with you, I think this changes the way some teams will strategize against the Royals bullpen. If you are facing Lucas Erceg in the bottom of the 9th inning and it's a leadoff double, yeah, you could bunt the guy over. It's also easier said than done to bunt off 99, 100 with movement. But if you bunt the guy over, who is to say that Lucas Erceg doesn't just blow the next guy away? If you've got 98, 99, 100 with a 91-mile-an-hour changeup, you can just eliminate that opportunity. Strike somebody out or get a bad swing where they can pop it up. You can jam them and it rolls it over to 2nd or 1st and the guy can't score from 3rd. All of these chances are going to happen again at some point, but now it's different and the way the Royals can handle the final 6 outs of the game. I think Hunter Harvey gets better. I really do. I think the addition of Lucas Erceg helps Hunter Harvey. It kind of solidifies his role where he's the 7th or the 8th inning guy. I think this helps James McArthur and John Schreiber. But whereas the bullpen back in May and June relied on those guys having their A game and being able to locate, now you can get the B- or the B game from Lucas Erceg and still be fine. Hunter Harvey has struggled with falling behind hitters, but when he attacks, he's got the stuff. he's got a 91, 92 mile an hour splitter. That is wipeout. That is devastating to some hitters. When you get those hitters behind 0-2, 1-2, or a 2-2 even count, it makes it harder for them to be in attack mode. I still think with some of the arms in the Royals bullpen, you can be in attack mode when you're down 2 strikes because they're not going to blow you away. Now, Serpa can run it up 97, 98. Sam Long's 95, 96. Hunter Harvey is 97 to 99, and Ersig's 98 to 100. That's the type of power the Royals have been begging to get over the last month or two, and now they're going to have it for the final 2 months of the season. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, the Royals are done with the White Sox for 2024. What can we take away from these 13 games? And I've got a message for those that may not be as serious about what they did to the White Sox in 2024. That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in Prize Picks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today, because you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, and you can turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select player stat projections to helping your lineup hit on a Tuesday or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the Prize Pick app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy on Prize Picks. Well, as we mentioned in the first segment, the Royals wrapped up their 13th and final game against the Chicago White Sox in 2024, and they went 12-1 in those 13 games. This is the worst team that I think baseball has ever seen in the modern era. I should probably clarify that. I think that they are going to lose 120 games or more. It wouldn't shock me if they didn't get to 40 wins this year. At this point, I don't really know. I mean, to lose 17 games in a row, on top of already losing 14 in a row earlier this year, I can't say that I've seen this before. Not in my lifetime, at least. But I do know the stat out there of the Royals being 48-48 against everybody in Major League Baseball that's not named the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox are the exception of what the Royals have seen this year. They are a 4A team that the Royals beat up on. And though that shouldn't be very impressive when you look at a team that's 27-84, I think the easy thing to say is, well, they should do that. They should do that to a bad baseball team. But I've also seen a team like Cleveland this year, who's #1 in the Central, has been one of the best teams in baseball, is definitely going to be going to the postseason in October. They've lost more than once to the Chicago White Sox. And the point being, baseball's weird. Baseball's random. Sometimes you lose to a team that is completely inferior to you. And I would flip it on the stat of, well, they're 500 against the rest of baseball and 12-1 against an awful team. And one of the worst teams, if not the worst team, the modern era has ever seen. The flip side to that is, if the Royals went 9-4 against the White Sox, wouldn't you be a little bit underwhelmed that there's 3 extra wins on the table? You just left, right? You have to take advantage of every time you play a bad team. We talk about that all the time. I see it on Twitter all the time of, you have to take advantage of when you're playing the A's or when you're playing the Marlins or when you're playing the Rockies. And the Royals didn't do that against Oakland in Oakland. They didn't do that against Colorado. They did it against Oakland and Kansas City. They somewhat took advantage against Miami when they were in Kansas City, but it was an ugly series. No, they did everything they needed to do against the White Sox in 2024. And I'll be honest, it could be the difference in them getting into the playoffs and not getting it. Because this has now given them a big cushion going into the final 2 months of the season. They, at the point I am talking, as you know, this is going to come out probably an hour later, and when this game wraps up between the Red Sox and the Mariners, but potentially they could have a 3-game lead in the wild card race and be tied for the second wild card spot by the end of the day. They already are tied with the second wild card spot because Minnesota won and the Royals didn't lose any ground there. But you could look at that and say, well, they're not that good. They just beat up on the White Sox. Well, not everybody has been as dominant as the Royals against the White Sox. And good, they should be dominant. That's a terrible baseball team they're facing. I would rather you just take care of business, beat the tar out of somebody, and move on with your schedule. If the Royals finish 500 this year against everybody else in Major League Baseball, that's still not a bad feat. Go 500 against good teams and bad teams, and then you just dominated a awful team. It's good enough to get you into the playoffs. Right? If the Royals go 500 the rest of the way, I believe 11 games over 500 would get them into the postseason picture. That's at least where I'm at right now. There are 51 games left. Is that right? Maybe 53. I think it's 53 games left. If they're 60 and 49 right now, it's game 109, so 53 games left. If they go, again, I'm putting myself on the spot with math. If they go, what would that be? 26 and 26, basically. I know there's an extra game in there being the 53rd game. If we go 26 and 26, there's 86 wins. I think that gets you into the playoffs, or 87 wins. I think that gets you into the playoffs. So I'm not overly concerned about them being 500 against the rest of baseball because it's August 30th, or it's July 31st. There's 2 months to go. There's no more underlying numbers of, oh, it's going to catch up to them. They may not make the playoffs this year. I can't really predict the final 2 months of the season. There's going to be a really tough stretch coming up in 2 weeks here, and it's going to go on for about a month. But at this point, I'm not looking at it in the same way I looked at it back in May, when the Royals had pounded the White Sox and still had an entire 3.5, 4 months left of the season. Now, you couldn't look at 34-19 and say, absolutely going to the playoffs. They are dominant. They're going to be 15, 20, 25 games over 500. You couldn't do that in May. There's 2 months to go here. And they hold a playoff spot by a handful of games. Like, it's either they're going to run into some really good teams and not be able to hold their own. They're going to go through a rough patch and it's not going to matter in the end. Those things can happen, but I wouldn't take losing a series of the Phillies or losing a series to the Twins as exposing them. I wouldn't. I would just say that they beat them 3 games in a row. And the Royals have been swept once this year. They have only lost 4 in a row as their max losing streak. To me, if they go through a bad stretch, it's not because they're a terrible baseball team and only could beat up on the White Sox. It might just not be a good matchup for them. It might just be a problem to beat the Phillies or the Twins or the Guardians. Like, time will tell, but they also took 3 of 4 against Cleveland when they saw them in Kansas City. Like, I think there's this misconception of just because you pound on a bad team and you play average baseball against the rest, oh, you're not that good. I don't think the Royals are the top team in the American League or a top 3 team in the American League. Just going on the seeding, they're the 6th best team in the American League. And I think that's accurate. No, they took care of business. They didn't leave any games on the table against the Chicago White Sox. Technically won, but it was a doubleheader, and sweeping a doubleheader is already hard to do. So to me, I think what the Royals did is impressive, of winning 12 of 13 against a bad baseball team, a historically bad baseball team. Because I also will say this, regardless of opponent, I think when it comes to sweeps or taking series, these are still grown professionals. They are paid millions of dollars to win baseball games. The White Sox haven't done a lot of that, but still, if you match them up against a team 13 times, I don't think there are 20 teams in baseball or 29 teams in baseball that would go 12-1 against them. I think some teams would struggle. They'd be lackadaisical. They wouldn't be as fired up for those games. We saw it when the Royals only took 1 of 3 against the A's. We saw it when they only took 1 of 3 against the Rockies. It's weird. Baseball is weird like that, and you should never apologize for winning games or beating up on a really bad team. I think the Royals did exactly what they were supposed to. They took care of business, and if they make the playoffs in October, I think you can look to this season series against the White Sox and say that's a big reason as to why. They just dominated the team. They absolutely should have dominated. If they went 10-3 or 9-4 or 8-5 and they missed out, I think you'd be saying the way they didn't dominate the White Sox is why they're not playing in October. So that's just my 2 cents on their absolute and utter curb stompings for 12 of the 13 games of the Chicago White Sox. Yes, I know some of them were close, but overall, the Royals did not struggle one bit with Chicago in 2024. Before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, Alec Marsh has gone to Omaha. Michael Lorenzen has gone to the 5th spot in the rotation. Why do we think the Royals made this move, and what can we expect in the future? That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. One last shout out to our final sponsor today in SupplyHouse. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Before the game today, we got word that the Royals were going to make the decision of figuring out Michael Lorenzen's role for this team, which will be as a starter. He is now going to be starting on Saturday against the Detroit Tigers, his former team, a team he made the All-Star game with last year before being traded to Philadelphia. And the Royals, in response, demoted Alec Marsh to AAA. Now, this is not the end of the road for Alec Marsh. I do think they view Alec Marsh as a big piece of this team in September. But right now, the best course of action is giving the starting spot every 5th day in the 5th spot to Michael Lorenzen, a guy who has better numbers, better underlying numbers than Alec Marsh this year, and a guy who's done this before, who's thrown in a playoff push, who has thrown in the playoffs, right? He's been there. He's been around the block. He's thrown a lot of innings before where Alec Marsh has not. So to me, that's what I envisioned when they made that move. You know, I put out there with the breaking news on, was it Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday when the Royals actually acquired Michael Lorenzen. I said this likely bumps Alec Marsh to the bullpen. Now, wasn't exactly correct. That was kind of a half right, half incorrect because Alec Marsh is not going to the bullpen. But Michael Lorenzen just seemed like that's what you're going to bring him in here to do, is to start every 5th day. You're not bringing him in here to be a long reliever. Like, why would you go spend resources on bringing in a guy who's starting for a reigning World Series champion team and then not put him over Alec Marsh? Like, that's why, even with some of the pushback I got I don't think this necessarily means Marsh is going to the bullpen. They could put Lorenzen there and Marsh just has some extra relief. I always thought that Michael Lorenzen was going to be going into the rotation. It's not to be an I told you so moment. I just thought with the way Marsh had been throwing, it was time to make a decision. It was time to make a move. Now, the move is Alec Marsh is going down to AAA, not to throw out of the bullpen, but to be used in shorter stints. And Annie Rogers of MLB.com does great work out there, put out there this morning as she had a chance to talk with Matt Cotrero, that the plan is to put him in starts where he'll throw 40 to 60 pitches. He'll be used as an opener. And I take that in a weird way of, I don't really see the end goal here, because the hope should be Michael Lorenzen takes this fifth spot and runs with it. That you feel good every fifth day about Michael Lorenzen taking the ball, climbing the bump, and doing what everybody else in the rotation does, which is give you a quality start. He doesn't need to be Seth Lugo. He doesn't need to be Cole Reagans. He just needs to be better than Alec Marsh. With of the last 8 or 9 starts, doesn't seem that hard to do. But at the end of the day, Alec Marsh is going to have some role on this team, and I believe in September. John Schreiber is on the injured list. I'd imagine that when Michael Lorenzen joins the team tomorrow or Friday, would that be? Yeah, Friday, Jonathan Bowen will go back to Omaha. When John Schreiber is activated, I think that, spells the end of the line for Chris Stratton. I heard that, James McArthur's another option just on Twitter, was more so about debating it. I could see it too, but a lot of it comes down to what happens over the next month that Schreiber's out of. Does MacArthur thrive in a different role, or does Chris Stratton thrive in a different role? And they can make their decision from that point because MacArthur does have options. But that's how I see it playing out. But for Marsh, if he's going to go down there and be an opener and throw 40 to 60 pitches, okay. But if Lorenzen pitches well, you're not going to be bringing Alec Marsh up to be an opener. Like, it seems like that's the fallback of, well, if Lorenzen struggles and he's not better than Marsh, well, Marsh has been an opener and he's been throwing 2 to 3 innings every single start. Let's just do that up in Kansas City. That to me feels like they're not capitalizing on what could be a very high ceiling for Alec Marsh. And I've thought that in a 1-inning workload, already seeing him touch 97 and 98 before, see if he can do that in a 1-inning workload. He's got a good sweeper. He's got a good curveball. He's got a good slider. All those are kind of the same type of pitches, but it gets some swing and miss. We have seen some starts this year from Alec Marsh where he got some ugly swing and miss stuff from guys. He had 20 plus against the Angels all the way back in May, I believe it was. So he's done it before. And I think that stuff in the bullpen can play well. But I think for my hope is that Michael Lorenzen does well in the 5th spot. And you don't have to relinquish that role back to Alec Marsh. That's my hope. But also my hope is that Alec Marsh could find something and add more gas, in a good way, to the back end of the bullpen. Not pouring gas on fires, as it happened many times with the Royals bullpen this year. But when you've got Lucas Erceg and Hunter Harvey pumping it in at 98, 99, 100, and you got Sam Long and Serpa throwing 95, 96, 97 from the left side, I would love to see Alec Marsh kind of have that role of, if you need to turn somebody in the 5th and the 6th inning, give him 2 innings right there. And that still could be the role. I just wish we could have seen it in Omaha instead of him starting every 5th day and only throwing 40 or 60 pitches. Now, maybe that's the plan, and it changes once he gets there. However, I just don't think they're maximizing the value of Alec Marsh if you're going to demote him. And I do believe that, there's a very obvious reason why he went to Omaha and they didn't just bump him to the bullpen and he starts throwing out in relief right there. Because that's hard to do at the big league level when since spring training, you've been starting. You have been stretched out, right? You've had a different mentality. And now you just throw him to the bullpen and you don't know when you're going to pitch. You don't know what high leverage spot you're going to be in. You don't know if you're going to be coming in a blowout, right? There are just certain mentalities that are different as a reliever than as a starter. So you go put him down at the minor league level in AAA. There's no pressure down there. You go in there, work on your craft. And also it was brought up in Andy Rogers' tweet that it is about workload too, that he's running out of gas a little bit. This gives him that time to rebuild again, take a little bit of a breather, and Michael Lorenzen can take that spot for the time being. But if Michael Lorenzen thrives, which I think the hope is for him to do, I would love to see Alec Marsh back in September when the roster expands to 28 and you can carry 14 pitchers. And now you got this weapon in the back end of the bullpen that can help you out. Now, if he's throwing as an opener and he's throwing in 2 to 3 innings per start, maybe that is your weapon. That if Michael Lorenzen goes 4 innings in a start in September, let's turn it over to Marsh for 3 because he's already been throwing 40 to 60 pitches down in Omaha every other time he throws. So maybe that is the plan. We'll see how that plays out. But we do know for a fact Michael Lorenzen will be starting for the Kansas City Royals on Saturday against the Detroit Tigers to wrap up that road trip on Sunday. Then they'll be heading back home to take on the Boston Red Sox for a big series at Kauffman Stadium. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the Royals will be in Motown against the Tigers. It'll be Seth Lugo tomorrow. It'll be Cole Reagans and Tarek Skubal on Friday, Michael Lorenzen on Saturday, and then it'll be Michael Wacha on Sunday. But as for us, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen every day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to preview that upcoming series with the Detroit Tigers and maybe how this lineup can get a little bit better from that leadoff spot. Now they haven't made any trades. Who needs to lead off and who are some sleeper picks that I may have? That's all coming up tomorrow on Locked On Royals. So until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.